to introduce our graduation speaker, Governor Kate Brown. Kate Brown is our 38th governor. Of course, even more impressive than her governorship is that Kate Brown is a proud Lewis and Clark Law School alum from the class of 1985. Governor Brown grew up in Minnesota and earned her undergraduate degree from the University of Colorado Boulder. She initially came to Oregon to attend Lewis and Clark Law School, where she received her law degree with a certificate in environmental law. In 2016, we honored Governor Brown as our Distinguished Graduate of the Year. And in 2010, she was named a Distinguished Environmental Law Graduate. Prior to running for public office, Governor Brown practiced family law. She served for 17 years in the state legislature, 5 years in the Oregon House of Representatives, and 12 years in the Oregon State Senate. In 2004, she made history when her colleagues elected her Senate Majority Leader, making her the first woman in Oregon history to serve in that role. After joining the legislature, Governor Brown practiced juvenile law, taught at Portland State University, worked with the Juvenile Rights Project, and co-founded the Oregon Women's Health and Wellness Alliance. From 2009 to 2015, Governor Brown served as Oregon's Secretary of State, where she was a leader in increasing government transparency and accountability, improving family and medical leave, advocating for women's health, and advancing civil rights and marriage equality. With her husband, Dan Little, Governor Brown raised Dan's son and daughter, who are now grown. And when our governor is not busy at the Capitol in Salem, you'll find her kayaking or horseback riding or hiking. So please join me in welcoming the governor of the state of Oregon from the law school class of 1985, Governor Kate Brown.
Thank you so very much. Good morning, everyone, and congratulations to our graduates. We are so very proud of you. I am deeply, deeply honored to be here today. Thank you to Dean Jennifer Johnson and the Law School administration for inviting me to return home. I loved being a student here. As you graduates have discovered, this is truly a special place. A place where, through a special mixture of adrenaline, terror, and perspiration, you are transformed from a regular person into a lawyer. Today, as newly minted lawyers, you will take the first steps down the path toward your future. But before you do, take just a moment to look around at your classmates. You all came here from 36 states and 16 countries in pursuit of a law degree or a master's of law. And these degrees you have earned. But you take something else with you today, something equally precious and hard-won: good friends. The friendships you have made at law school are likely to be the most profound and long-standing relationships of your life. I know they are for me. Why? Because law school is the crucible that formed you into who you are today. As your classmate Amanda Gom said, you kind of go through the fire together and you understand the same trauma. That fire changes us. Anita Hill swears law school fundamentally changed how she thinks, how she solves problems, and how she sees the world. writer Charles Morgan famously said, "If Moses had gone to Harvard Law School and spent 3 years on the Hill, he would have written the 10 Commandments with 3 exceptions and a savings clause." Your legal education has prepared you well. And if the 10 Commandments aren't up for revision, there's still plenty of opportunity to pursue a life of meaningful work. In fact, I'd say you're fully capable of changing the world. Please do. You depart these halls today into a world that desperately needs your brains, your energy, and your dedication to create a more ethical, compassionate, and inclusive society. Lately, Americans have learned firsthand and in disconcerting ways the importance of the judicial branch in protecting and serving the public good. When the executive branch unlawfully banned travel to the United States by people from a number of Muslim countries, who overturned it? A court of law. When the executive branch sought to deny federal funding to sanctuary cities, who shut it down? A court of law. It begs the question, when our president tweeted, "See you in court," I wonder if he meant so many courts so soon. The new administration faces a whole host of real and threatened court challenges to a range of new policies, from rollbacks of clean air and water regulations to religious liberty protections. With Congress seemingly unable or unwilling to influence or oppose many of these policies, the courts are, in reality, our only hope of protecting the public good. It comes down to this. Today's political superheroes, the ones fighting the good fight and often winning, are, take a guess, attorneys. Yes, attorneys. Maybe a law degree should come with a sparkly suit or at least a cape. Because, as we see almost daily, the fight for justice never ends. Unfortunately, there is no shortage of discrimination and inequity in the world. You simply need to choose which worthy cause to fight for. A great example is your classmate, Tessa Copeland. Tessa came to Lewis and Clark for its animal law program, which, like environmental law and other specialties here, is outstanding. But Tessa discovered an even greater passion. With other Lewis and Clark law students, she volunteered at the Dilley Detention Center in Texas, working with women and children seeking asylum in the United States. Women and their children can be incarcerated for months while their asylum cases wander through the immigration system. In their countries, some of these women suffered severe abuse, death threats, and other traumas. They dare not go home. Most arrive at the Dilley Center severely sleep-deprived. Many suffer from PTSD. They worry about making their case, especially in front of a male asylum officer. They do not want to relive their past traumas, particularly in front of their children. These women have credible, compelling stories to tell. But as Tessa says, they don't often realize it. Her job was to be their advocate, to help draw those stories out of them, to help prepare them for the make-or-break interviews with asylum officers who would determine their fate and the fate of their children. Back at Lewis and Clark, Tessa has continued to volunteer remotely, doing such things as making sure that data are entered correctly, because anything incorrect on an asylum application can cause a lengthy delay or a denial. Through this experience, Tessa learned firsthand that one person can affect meaningful change. As she said, the JD is that powerful tool you can use to make a difference in the world. I'm very proud that Tessa plans to become an immigration lawyer, focusing on asylum seekers and victims of violence. My Oregon, our Oregon, must be a welcoming and inclusive place for all. As you know, it hasn't always been this way. It wasn't until 1912, 53 years after Oregon's founding, that women were finally able to exercise our right to vote. And while I was in law school, there was just one woman on the Oregon Supreme Court. One. And even though I didn't think I would ever become a judge, and still don't for the record, it was really important to me that she was there. She was my beacon of hope. Her name was Betty Roberts, and her courage, grace, and grit inspire me to this very day. After completing her master's degree in 1962, Betty applied for, but was rejected by, the political science doctoral program at the University of Oregon. The chair of the department told her that at 39 years old, she was way too old, and that taxpayers wouldn't get back their investment in her education. So she decided to become a lawyer. A few years after I was born, she started law school at Lewis and Clark's night program. At the time, she was also raising 4 children, teaching high school, and running for the Oregon legislature, all on her own. She won that legislative seat. She spent the next several years fighting gender discrimination, working to protect Oregon's environment, and starting her own successful law practice. In 1974, she ran for governor and lost in the primary to Bob Straub. That same year, Oregon Democrats nominated her to face Bob Packwood in the race for the U.S. Senate. She lost for a second time that year. These could have been soul-crushing defeats. Not for this woman of grace and grit and incredible moxie. 3 years later, Governor Bob Straub, her former opponent, called and asked to have her serve on the Oregon Court of Appeals. She became the first woman to serve on that court. Given her esteemed political and legal career, you think she would have earned respect on the bench as well. Not so. For her entire first year, she was ostracized by all of her male colleagues and the entire court staff. What incredible isolation and loneliness she must have felt. What courage it must have taken for her to go to work every single day. Yet, Justice Roberts persisted, and her hard work was recognized by the next governor. In our entire state's history, there had been 82 associate justices on the Oregon Supreme Court. All had been men. Governor Vic Atiyeh changed that. He appointed Justice Roberts to the Oregon Supreme Court, making her the first woman in Oregon history to serve on our state's highest court. Her tenure was extremely successful. She was highly respected by all of her colleagues. She authored a number of insightful opinions that bent the arc of justice. And she gave women like me hope that someday and in some way there would be a place at the table and on the bench for all of us. She retired from the Oregon Supreme Court the year I started practicing law. Yes, progress, especially institutional progress, comes too slowly, if you ask me. Take, for instance, one of the first bills I signed into law as your governor. It guarantees Oregon children all-day kindergarten. I did so in March of 2015, 50 years after Betty Roberts advocated for it in the Oregon legislature in 1965. And in a few days from now, I look forward to signing into law the groundbreaking pay equity bill. House Bill 2005 establishes better protections to eliminate the gender pay gap, and it makes great strides toward a more equitable and prosperous Oregon. And for the first time in our state's 158-year history, women will soon become the majority on our state's highest court. I have appointed Judge Rebecca Duncan to the Oregon Supreme Court. She will join 3 other women justices, 2 of whom I have appointed, currently serving on our 7-member court. I would like to think that Justice Betty Roberts would be very proud of the progress that we continue to make. Justice Roberts is an important hero in Oregon's history, but you are the heroes of Oregon's future. We, our state and our nation, we need you. We need fighters for justice in and out of the courtroom. So, as your governor, I hereby charge you as the next generation of advocates, leaders, and problem solvers to be ethical, be compassionate, be courageous, and fight for justice in all that you do. Thank you, and congratulations.
Governor Brown, your journey to Oregon and a life dedicated to the law and public service began in Spain, where you were born, advanced in Minnesota, where you grew up, and gained momentum in Colorado, where you graduated from college before making your way to Lewis and Clark Law School. We were lucky about that. From an early age, you envisioned the law as a powerful force for changing the world through the pursuit of justice and equality. That principle has marked your career at every step, whether practicing family law, advocating for the Women's Rights Coalition, or serving the people of Oregon, first in the state legislature, then as Secretary of State, and most recently as our governor. Along the way, you have transformed from young idealist into pragmatic progressive, worked to find common ground among opposing factions, and practiced the difficult art of legislating and governing by building relationships. For your steadfast dedication to fulfilling the promises of the law and for your leadership in upholding the civil rights and human dignity of every Oregonian, Lewis and Clark is honored this day to confer on you, Governor Kate Brown, the degree of Doctor of Laws honoris causa.